So I'm here with Paul Klenk and Seph Zdarko. Just to save you, Seph, the 100 times explaining this, Seph is the back part of Joseph, which his parents were going to name him, and they didn't want him to be called Joey, so they went with Seph. There you go. Well, why don't you guys introduce yourself?
Thank you for now offending every Joe in the audience.
So why don't you guys introduce yourself?
Sure. We'll get started. My name is Paul Klenk. I'm a principal financial analyst for Research Square. So we're sort of a niche company in which we provide English language editing services for non-native English-speaking scientists. So a scientist in Brazil whose native language is Portuguese will write a paper in English, and then they'll send it to us to ensure that it sounds like a native English-speaking paper when they send it in for peer review. And so this creates a niche market on a global scale. And so that's where we've engaged iProspect Raleigh.
Good.
Great, and I'm Seph Zdarko, and I'm the head of partner strategy and attribution at Quantcast. I've been in this industry for over 15 years. I've been both on the buy side and the sell side, a number of different different companies through Google and Performix and DoubleClick, and now Quantcast, and happy to be here to geek out on attribution.
Good start. Let's do that. So, Paul, tell me about your entry into attribution. I know that we've worked together for quite a while now, but what were some of the biggest pain points that you had that were needed to be solved that we were able to help you with?
Sure. So when we engaged iProspect Raleigh, we were initially looking for a group to help us find new customers. So I was saying we are really a niche market on a global scale. So finding new customers is definitely a difficult thing, and we really need our digital advertising partners to help us with that. 30% of our customers are from China, less than 5% are from the US, and we're spread out across the rest of the world beyond that. So it's a situation where we really need to find ways of reaching those people. And in terms of that, so that's number one. And then we realized about within 6 months that we had another major problem at our company, which was that our senior management team didn't have a strong understanding of what the return on their digital ad spend was. They saw marketing, especially digital marketing, as a little bit of a black box. And ultimately, attribution and working with Mark and his team on attribution was critical in terms of bridging that gap, framing that conversation, and then ultimately providing data to inform strategy moving forward.
You mentioned new to file, and that's a big piece of Rockett. iProspect Raleigh was Rockett Interactive, just so everybody knows how that office came to be. But
I've been working hard to say iProspect Raleigh.
Yeah. Integration of data. So new to file customers is a key thing, but we can only optimize on that information if we can determine that it's a new customer. So just talk a little bit about that experience and what we did to make that connection.
Sure, and as I mentioned, we're looking for new customers. We're asking you guys to find new customers, and yet via the cookies, it's very difficult to determine who's new. And so what we did is now we send weekly data with unique identifiers on transactions back to iProspect Raleigh, and you use those unique identifiers to match them with your database. And then you include new to file based on that matchback in our weekly reporting. This allows us to see by channel, not just our return on investment, but also what percentage of that channel was new to file, which is an important metric for us at this point.
Good. So, Seph, a thought for you, or maybe you can help explain, because as we talk about expanding a universe or scaling a client's business and trying to find new customers, ultimately we're looking at upper funnel activities. So split funnel is something that Quantcast is really solid at. But ultimately, explain the funnel, what those pieces are, and ultimately how you like to look at that.
Sure. So split funnel attribution is an open source initiative that we've been working on for well over a year. We're actively giving it away. I'm talking with all the attribution providers, the ad servers, competitors, just anyone in the landscape that has some influence or insight into attribution. And essentially what it is it's about, well, I'd say fundamentally, it's fairly simple, but foundationally, it changes the way we look at attribution forever. And what it does is it's taking a single point measurement system. So typically today, when we look at attribution, we look at the funnel, right? Consumers move down the path from awareness to consideration to preference to purchase. And the beautiful thing about online advertising is we can measure all those interaction points as consumers move down that funnel. But the problem from an attributional perspective is that everyone's path is different, right? Everyone has a different path to that conversion event. So attribution requires a common signal, some point to model from, to look up and say, okay, from that usually conversion event, right? What of all those interaction points had the highest probability of leading to that desired result? But what we have is a proximity bias, where what happens closest to that point of measurement seems to seem like it has the largest effect. And what split funnel is doing is trying to remove that bias and adding a second point of measurement halfway up the funnel to properly split the funnel, if you will, into upper funnel prospecting, leveraging third-party data, and lower funnel retargeting, leveraging first-party data, and looking at those two unique forms of advertising, which are fundamentally different in terms of the tactics and the tools that we have to achieve those two. They're so different, yet we look at them through the same lens. And what happens is retargeting generally overshadows a lot of that upper funnel prospecting. And so it's really about removing those two signals, looking at them independently, so that you can compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges.
Good. So one example about that, and one that is real to Research Square, was a recent example where one of the tags, so Research Square has 2 points of contact, if you will, that are deemed to be conversions. One is an account sign-up, and then 2 is a purchase of, say, translation services or formatting or whatever it is, peer review. And there were 2 distinct things, and one comes before the other. And tell us a little bit about, we had those 2 tags running, and then we ran into some issues. I think iProspect Raleigh found within a couple days that the account sign-up tag got removed. And then, as I'm sure most of the clients here, the production queue for IT was significant, and they were not willing, or timely anyway, put that tag back in. And then there also became an issue about the value of it. So maybe tell us about that.
So essentially, February, I remember the date, February 25th. The marketing team's laughing over there. We launched a new account registration page as a company, and in so doing, we dropped the account sign-up tag. Our Prospect Raleigh team was on this very quickly, but when it was brought to our attention and we discussed it within our team, I was able to say to our development team, our IT team, this is very hard for us because we can't measure what's going on, and if we can't measure it, it's not happening as a business. We need this. It's a persuasive argument, but it's not nearly as persuasive as we're losing money. So then I was able to say, I'm told by our partners that this could cause us to be losing money in the future because it may be harder for us to prospect and target potential customers. But it was really a supposition at that point. Fast forward about a month and a half or so, and I'm looking at the reports that we get, and the percentage of new customers from Quantcast has dropped substantially. So the percentage of the total transactions that we're getting via this new-to-file matchback is less new and more returning. Still delivering transactions, still delivering what we're asking of Quantcast, but the percentage of the customers that we really want has dropped. And so we are discussing this amongst the team, and then your team, the iProspect Raleigh team, brings that to Quantcast's attention, and you actually, I believe, sent our new-to-file report on to Quantcast, and this developed a conversation in which you identified the issue.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, we find that it's really about the data, the more first-party data you can gather to then model off of behaviorally to predict from that prospecting phase to try to determine, is a consumer going to be at the right stage in their life or in the right mindset to be receptive to an ad, and understanding as much of that known truth, right? That what is an actual converting audience throughout those different stages of the funnel. So it's not just someone bought the product, but if there is an indicator of even visiting the site or filling out a form, all of those lead to building a better predictive model. And so typically we find, we're generally one of the better performers, if not the best, in two different scenarios. And one is data. There's a problem with the data. So either it's broken or we're not getting it properly, because from our modeling perspective, it's simple, but it's crap in, crap out, right? If you don't have good data, you're not going to get a good prospecting model off of it. And then the second is attribution. If there's poor attribution, then it often incentivizes the wrong things. In the words of Stephen Dubner, right, where you measure is where you incent. So if you are only measuring in a certain spot, then you're going to incent all that behavior there. So no, it totally makes sense.
Good. So one of the things about attribution, we really need to define that, and we're going to have an attribution lab tomorrow where we'll go into a lot more detail about how we look at that as a company and give you some insights there. But we do know that from this funnel distribution and the redistribution of value, which is essentially what attribution is from last click to introducer or influencer, non-brand search and prospecting display are typically going to increase in value because they are going to find new customers. And one of the things, talk about the timing, that once you found the details of our analysis, because Quantcast appeared to continue to deliver new customers for several weeks. And at a certain point, it dropped off, which caused a big concern.
Absolutely, and there was a time lag there, and essentially the conversation that occurred between your team and the Quantcast team determined that this issue, which I saw it happen 4 or 5 weeks after this account sign up. I don't know that that's related. I have no way to determine that. And the Quantcast team looks at this and says, well, we can see the people that we're prospecting hitting your site. And from the first impression, the average time to the site is 4 weeks, and the average time to account sign up is 5, which matched exactly with this drop in percentage new customers. So you were able to really take that data, allow it to paint a picture that then I can take to our management team and just explain what's happening.
Yeah, so we look at, in one of the many metrics from split funnel is really, it's leveraging that first site visit, that delineation point between prospecting and retargeting, right? But retargeting's own definition is serving an ad to someone after they've been to your site. But most attribution platforms don't actually incorporate that into their measurement, which is surprising. We're working with a lot of folks to do that, and some of them are already in market, and many are coming in the coming year. But by leveraging that first site visit, we can then see, well, how long does it take to get someone to that point, right? To that initial handoff between third-party data to first-party data, right? Because when someone visits your site, that's when you drop that cookie and it's first-party data. That's your stack of leads that you use to try to mine and then bring people across that finish line. And so by looking at how long does it take to get from there and then to get to each of those different stages of, think of it like a relay race, understanding where those different pieces fall in, you can get that the increased insight and transparency to make better optimization decisions. And that's ultimately what we discovered through trial and error, through our own unique behavioral economic experiment.
I like how you call that trial and error. That's good. us breaking our site, that's a good thing.
One thing that Emily also referenced was getting an ad after a purchase for the same product she just bought. And it's essentially a waste of activity because you're getting retargeted, and there's the opportunity to negatively retarget. Basically say, I don't want to reach this person anymore unless I'm going to upsell them or cross-sell them. So how do you, 2 questions for you. So how do you guys go about that is to, it's an easy things to fix that most clients don't ask for. But 2, your optimization models based on, most optimization models for networks are on the conversion. But as you get into split funnel, one thing that we do at iProspect Raleigh is to say, we want you to drive people to the homepage or the add to cart or some significant piece of the site. And then I don't want you to talk to them anymore because retargeting is going to take over. And we don't want everyone going to the same exchanges and buying all of this activity and being less profitable for everyone. So talk to me a little bit about what your controls are for managing cookie delivery, and then how does your system optimize towards earlier funnel activities?
Yeah, so again, if you're measuring it properly, you should know exactly when that transition, that handoff to that first site visit happens from third-party to first-party data, and then that kicks off the second leg of that relay race, to use that analogy. Serving an ad to someone after they've already converted, from my perspective, it shouldn't happen. That means you either have bad tech or you're doing it intentionally. And when I say intentionally, so one of the, when you think about the attribution, the typical models, which are last touch, which have been around forever, in the early days of online targeting, it was very blunt, targeting tools, right? We would buy a publisher A, publisher B, maybe another network, but it was these big blunt CPM buys, and it only required blunt measurement to kind of measure their effectiveness. But today, with the advent of real-time bidding and big data, we've created these surgical precision instruments that can slice and dice impressions down to the minute millisecond to the individual, that can dance circle around these old, outdated attribution models. And with that, it's unfortunately become easier to game these outdated attribution models than it is to work within them. And so when I say that might have happened intentionally, a lot of these old models don't have the time. It might be broken down by the day, and serving an ad to someone right after they purchased can actually still be credited towards affecting that conversion. And it's really only through better measurement that we can eliminate a lot of those gaming tactics. In fact, I'll throw this out to you guys. If you do a search on Google for attribution gaming, there's an article that I wrote that's the #1 result. And it's not because it's that great of an article, although I think it's pretty good, but it's because no one's talking about it, right? So attribution gaming, I think, is a much bigger problem than we give it credit, right? Everyone's talking about viewability and fraud and all these issues, which are real, right? And I think we are going to figure them out. But attribution gaming, the waste of impressions through wasted retargeting and not really understanding where your ads are falling within that funnel and how they're influencing consumers to your desired result, that is a much bigger elephant in the room that we have the tools to fix. But yet, for some reason, as marketers, we don't leverage the tools that are available to us. And so I think I would encourage all of you to really look at not just measurement of improving what you have, right? Even if you've got last touch, that's fine. But it's make sure that you bring another referee, someone else, something else to look at that field, right? It's sort of like you wouldn't play a football game with one referee at the finish line and not someone at the line of scrimmage, right? Your holding and your offsides would be rampant. So you need to have someone else there measuring, so that even if you're using that some outdated attribution model as your system of record or KPIs for whatever reason, maybe bonuses are historically built off of it, but understand as the marketer where your biases are, so that you can truly make the right optimizations to ultimately get more value out of your current spend.
Excellent. So, Paul, let me talk about you mentioned management earlier, and the education process that happened to manage upwards, but also in terms of key metrics. So how was that managed? I mean, tell me a little bit about that experience with selling upwards and what metrics you find valuable to talk through.
You mentioned that last click is kind of outdated. I would say that when we began this process as a company, we had our management team looking a lot at the question that people signed up and they said, "How'd you find us?" So there was you've got people asking about. You're basically using the survey technique that Stephen Dovner was talking about having some problems with this morning to do attribution. And we had a lot of data from our search providers and our display providers prior to that, but it wasn't well understood. And so we needed to find a way to kind of bridge that gap. And this is where sort of the attribution modeling came in, that how'd you find us is a little bit like a introducer. First, it's by survey, but it's sort of what's the first way, how did you come to us? And so by recognizing that, we could then do two things. One, we could then say, okay, you're most interested in introducers, or maybe a high funnel, the upper funnel. We look at the splint funnel. Now that I know that our management team is interested in that and sees marketing for that, we can shape the data and we can work with your team to make sure that we're measuring the things that they want to see and provide it to them in a way that they can understand and is actionable for that team. Because ultimately, I think that they do a great job. They were just provided previously with a set of data that they found hard to digest and therefore went to something that was a little bit simpler. And this is an ongoing process. So what data is most important to us, most valuable to us? To me, the data that's most valuable is the data that tells what was the actual behavior change of the consumer based on our advertising spend. What's our actual return? That is really hard to get. I'm not going to say that we've figured that one out yet. But if it was that, and it was simple enough that everybody at the company could understand, that's perfect. And getting there, I mean, that's not. We're going to have a hard time getting to perfect. But right now, I'm looking at what's our return on investment by channel, using an estimated return using your influencer model. So we're looking across the funnel. And then secondarily, I'm looking at what's our new to file percentage by channel, and keeping an eye on that. And that's how we're really trying to work with you. And the reason we're doing this is really simple. I mean, from your perspective, we want to make sure that you're getting credit, as you said, for that prospecting is getting proper credit. From my perspective, in spending the money and helping our marketing team determine the money to spend, if that's getting proper credit, perhaps we should be spending a lot more money there. And so we need to understand that and understand where we should send our ad spend to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we look at campaigns between prospecting and retargeting. We do both. We'll do just prospecting, just retargeting, but we're always trying to figure out what is that right optimal mix. And I'd love to be here and give you a best practice as you should do exactly 80-20 or something like that. But the reality is, just like a prescription for nutrition or exercise is going to be unique to me and it's going to be different for everyone else, right? We're all experiments of one in that regard, so are our products and our brands. And what we need to really do is listen to the metrics, listen to our consumers, how they interact with our site, and move down that funnel to really figure out what is the right ratio of prospecting and retargeting, right? No one says we should do both. It is a right mix of the two. But being able to understand that and listen really to the data through better attribution to figure out how to truly optimize to get those maximum conversions.
Yeah, and I think retargeting is somewhat is capacity constrained. I mean, if you're managing that tactic properly or that channel properly so that you're only showing a certain frequency of ads to a user along their journey after saying add to cart to conversion or becoming a lead to purchasing something, you want to make sure you're managing that correctly. So you need to understand the relationship through attribution of if I add much more money to upper funnel activities, my retargeting is going to increase. I don't think it's necessarily a say that we're going to put money here or money here. You need to be just like brand search. You need to be there. If people are looking for you, you've got to find yourself. But then how do you get more people into that mix?
One feeds the other, right?
Yeah.
And I think but it's important to understand that in retargeting, the difference between good retargeting and bad retargeting is small because it's really a frequency, right? You can serve an ad to everybody in your retargeting tool. But prospecting, right? If you were to draw the actual funnel, it would be huge in the upper funnel. It would be teeny in the lower funnel, right? From that transition of first-party to third-party data. That upper funnel, because you can't serve an ad to everybody, just saying you do prospecting or increasing more prospecting, there's a big difference between the delta of good prospecting and bad prospecting, right? From spray and pray all the way to actually using real predictive models to try to figure out when the right time to serve an ad to someone out of the entire internet, right? Not just demographics or contextual, but all of those different elements lead into proper prospecting. So, and it does, right? It feeds into the next pool. If you're doing the right amount of prospecting, it should be feeding and building that retargeting pool that ultimately gives you true incrementality in terms of conversions.
So we got about 6 minutes left. So one thing I want to make sure that we get through, at least in your thoughts, or if you were starting an engagement or starting the process for looking for an attribution partner, from your perspective, but I'd love to hear yours as well, Seph, what should you think about? What should you consider as you move into that endeavor?
Right. Well, and I think that it's a great question. And in terms of going in and trying to find a partner to provide you with attribution, I think there's a couple of things that I would look for, and one of them is flexibility. There's not one model. I think you said it too. There's not one model that is going to provide you with all of the information you need. In a certain way, you need to kind of have a model of record or something like that. I mean, you need to sort of have, this is what I'm looking at the most. But understanding the funnel is going to come from being able to see a couple of different things. And so flexibility there, really, to get it right, you got to have people that really want to geek out on that data and really go through it and understand what's going on there. To give an example of that, we had one of the partners was working a lot on, one of our ad partners was Conversant. They were doing a lot of stuff with mobile. And I was talking to your team, and I said, look, this has not driven a single transaction. How can I sell that to our management team? Like, if somebody looks at this, they're going to ask why we're still spending money here. And the reason is they were in mobile. We weren't tracking cross-device very well, and the team put together, your team put together a way of looking at the correlation between number of impressions here and account signups. So impressions from Conversant to account signups that showed that this was still a good thing to continue doing. So even though it felt a little bit outside the model, you guys pushed to go for that correlation to say, look, this is something we should keep doing. There's value here. So I would say, flexibility with multiple models, and an understanding of kind of how to dive in and really utilize those models effectively.
Yeah, I think, I'd boil it down to this. All the attribution providers have their pluses and minuses. They're all really good. But to your point, to both of our points, don't rely on just one system, right? It's not a set it and forget it and you're done. They all have different nuances. It's something that you need to test and measure and reiterate. You should throw in an A/B test every now and then. You should constantly be, as a marketer, looking at the data, because if you don't have the right data, then you're not making the right decisions. And one system, they all have some bias. And so really it's about, I think, from my perspective, what I would encourage is whatever attribution provider you may have or maybe looking to work with, continually look at bringing in new or additional sources, different cuts on the data, to be able to look at it from a different perspective, because you want more than one referee on that field.
Absolutely. And one other piece too, when you're looking for a provider, the other piece I'd look for is you're talking about different ways to slice the data. I would look for people who can really help you explain that data to the rest of your team.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a black box.
Right, and it can't be, and that's been something that's been really important for us. But yeah, if they're telling you it's a black box or it's just sort of this is here, you want them to be a partner in exploring those models and ultimately in discussing the strategies that come out of using those models, because it's not one piece.
That's saying something, because Paul is actually a PhD from Duke. So if we can help him, there's no pulling any punches. He asks some really good questions, and he pushes us well, which we love. So just real quickly, one thing that you both mentioned was the black box, which is something that we as a company feel strongly that should not be there. It needs to be an educational environment where we can all find the same thing. But there's also the one solution fits all mentality, and that you will find a silver bullet that will drive your marketing spend in the future. Talk to me a little bit about that and maybe how we look at it.
But I think one of the things that is important is that, and you and I were talking about this before when we were walking up here, that there's, even if there were a silver bullet, it would be different tomorrow. We're in an industry in which things are changing all the time. So it's true there's not one solution that's good for everybody in this room. But even more importantly than that, there's not one solution that's going to be good for Research Square now, 6 months from now, a year from now. And so I was saying that we had a gap in communication at our company between senior management and what our digital advertising spend was getting us. I would say that we've closed that gap. The gap still exists, and so we're continually trying to find new ways of presenting the data to get us where we need to go.
Good. Well, that is it for us. I will be around for questions. Seph will absolutely be around, as well as Paul.
I will as well.
So find us if you have any other questions, and we'll be happy to answer them.